The crystal shattered against marble like a gunshot in the silence. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. The pregnant waitress stood frozen, her trembling hands still extended where the tray had been, her eyes locked on the man at table 7. And the man staring back at her, Kang Seong-ho, the most dangerous crime lord in Seoul, looked like he'd just seen a ghost. Because 8 months ago, he'd made sure this woman would never see him again. And now she was carrying his child. Stay with me until the end because this story will leave you speechless. But first, don't forget to like this video, hit that subscribe button, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Your support keeps Mafia Moonlight Tailies going strong. Now, let's dive in. It's a frigid January evening in Gangnam, Seoul, 2024. The Jade Phoenix restaurant glows like a jewel box against the winter night, its floor-to-ceiling windows revealing a world most people will never enter. This isn't a place you make reservations. This is a place where power brokers conduct business over aged whiskey and courses that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The kind of establishment where the staff are trained to be invisible, where discretion isn't requested, it's assumed. And tonight, the most exclusive private dining room belongs to Kang Seong-ho. At 36 years old, Seong-ho commands respect through silence and fear through reputation alone. His tailored black suit fits him like armor. The subtle tattoo creeping above his collar, the mark of his syndicate, serves as the only warning anyone ever needs. He sits at the head of a table surrounded by rival bosses, men who smile with their mouths while their eyes calculate trajectories of bullets. This is a peace negotiation, the kind where everyone knows the peace is temporary and the knives are always within reach. The conversation flows in careful Korean and occasional English, voices low and controlled. Territory boundaries are being redrawn, profit percentages are being negotiated, old grudges are being buried under new agreements, at least for now. This is how Seong-ho has built his empire over the past decade, through strategic alliances and the absolute certainty that crossing him means disappearing without a trace. He had learned early that in this world, emotion was a luxury that got you killed. Attachment was a weakness your enemies exploited. Love was a knife they'd slide between your ribs when you weren't looking. So Kang Seong-ho had become untouchable, unreachable, a man who moved through Seoul's underworld like winter itself, cold, inevitable, and without mercy. But then the door to the private dining room opens, and everything changes. The service at Jade Phoenix is choreographed like ballet. Waitstaff glide in and out with practiced invisibility, never interrupting, never drawing attention, which is why the sudden, sharp sound of shattering crystal cuts through the room like a scream. A tray of wine glasses explodes against the marble floor. Red wine spreads across white stone like blood, and standing in the wreckage, one hand pressed against her visibly pregnant belly, is a woman Seong-ho thought he'd never see again. Yoon Ara. Her server's uniform is crisp and professional, but her face has gone white as death. Her lips form his name without sound. The tray clatters from her other hand, adding to the destruction at her feet. She's trembling so violently that Seong-ho can see it from 15 feet away. The room falls into the kind of silence that precedes violence. Seong-ho's business associates turn to look at the disturbance, then back at him, reading his reaction with the attention of men whose survival depends on understanding power dynamics. One of them, Park Jin-woo, a snake in an expensive suit, leans back in his chair with a slow, spreading smile. Seong-ho SSI, Jin-woo says softly, his tone dripping with false concern. It seems your server is unwell. Shall we have her replaced? But Seong-ho can't speak, can't move, can't do anything but stare at Ara, at the woman he walked away from 8 months ago with nothing but an envelope of cash and a note that said stay away. It's safer for you. He'd done it to protect her from the gang war that had been brewing, a war that had left bodies in the street and alliances shattered. He'd thought he was saving her life. And now she's here, pregnant and wearing the uniform of someone who serves men like him for tips, working in a restaurant where one of his rivals could recognize the connection and use it to destroy them both. Ara's manager rushes over, apologizing profusely in rapid Korean, grabbing her elbow to pull her away. But Ara's eyes never leave Seong-ho's face, and in that gaze he sees everything: shock, betrayal, terror, and something else, something that looks like barely suppressed rage. Because Ara isn't just pregnant, she's 8 months pregnant, and Seong-ho knows, with the cold certainty of mathematics, exactly when she conceived. The child she's carrying is his. One of the other bosses clears his throat, trying to move past the awkward interruption. Another makes a joke in poor taste about clumsy staff. But Park Jin-woo keeps watching, his predator's instincts catching something everyone else missed. His eyes move from Seong-ho's frozen expression to Ara's tear-stained face to the protective way she cradles her belly. And then Jin-woo smiles wider. How fascinating, he murmurs, just loud enough for the table to hear. the great Kang Seong-ho, distracted by a pregnant waitress. One might think there was a personal connection there. The threat in those words hangs in the air like smoke. In their world, personal connection means leverage. It means weakness. It means a target painted on someone's back. Seong-ho forces his face into the mask he's worn for a decade, cold, bored, untouchable. But inside, his mind is racing through scenarios, all of them ending in blood, because he knows what happens next. Jinwoo will investigate. He'll discover that Ara lives alone in a basement apartment in Yongsan. He'll learn that she has no protection, no family, no one to notice if she disappears. And he'll use her to bring Seong-ho to his knees. The manager finally succeeds in pulling Ara toward the door, still apologizing, promising it won't happen again. Ara stumbles, one hand catching the doorframe. She looks back one final time, and the expression on her face nearly breaks something in Seong-ho's chest that he thought was long dead. Then she's gone. The dinner continues, deals are finalized, agreements are reached. Seong-ho plays his part perfectly, the unshakable crime lord who's seen it all and fears nothing. But his mind is 8 months in the past, remembering the last time he saw Ara, the way she'd cried when he told her it was over, the way she'd thrown his money back at his feet, the way she'd screamed that she didn't need his protection if it meant losing him. He'd walked away anyway. He'd thought he was being strong, being smart, being the kind of man who survived in a world built on violence and betrayal. Now, as he watches Park Jinwoo make a quiet phone call in the corner of the room, Seong-ho realizes he's made the biggest mistake of his life. You see, Kang Seong-ho hadn't always been Seoul's most feared crime lord. Once, a lifetime ago, he'd been different. He'd been the son of a street-level enforcer who died in a territorial dispute when Seong-ho was barely 16. He'd clawed his way up through the ranks by being smarter, more ruthless, and more willing to sacrifice than anyone else. He'd built his reputation on the understanding that attachment was death, that caring about anything made you vulnerable, that the only way to survive was to become something harder than the world trying to crush you. And for nearly 2 decades, that philosophy had kept him alive. Then he'd met Yoon Ara. She'd been working at a small bookshop in Itaewon, a place that stayed open late and catered to insomniacs and artists. Seong-ho had ducked inside one night to avoid a tale, and found himself in a world that seemed impossibly distant from his own. Ara had looked up from behind the counter with curious eyes and asked if she could help him find something. For reasons he still didn't fully understand, Seong-ho had answered honestly, "Something that reminds me the world isn't completely terrible." Ara had smiled and handed him a book of poetry. For 3 months, Seong-ho had lived a double life. By day, he was the untouchable crime lord. By night, he was just Seong-ho, the man who met Ara after her shifts and walked her home through streets lit by convenience store signs and late-night food vendors. She'd known he was involved in something dangerous. You didn't survive in Seoul without learning to read certain signs. But she'd never asked, and he'd never told. It had been the happiest he'd been since childhood. Then the gang war started. A territorial dispute that exploded into open violence, the kind that left bullet holes in storefront windows and bodies in alleyways. Seong-ho's enemies started going after the people his allies cared about, sending messages written in blood and grief. And Seong-ho had realized with icy clarity that if anyone discovered Ara existed, she would become a target too. So he'd ended it, quickly, brutally, in the way he ended everything. He'd left her money she didn't want and instructions to forget him. Then he'd disappeared from her life completely, convinced he was protecting her, convinced that his absence was an act of love. He'd never considered that she might already be carrying his child. Now, as Park Jinwoo returns to the table with that knowing smile still playing at his lips, Seong-ho understands that his past has caught up with him in the worst possible way. The war he'd thought he was protecting Ara from has found her anyway. And this time, she's not just alone. She's pregnant, vulnerable, and working in a restaurant where Seoul's most dangerous men gather weekly. The dinner finally ends. Polite bows are exchanged. Promises are made that everyone knows are conditional. Seong-ho walks out of Jade Phoenix with his usual entourage of silent bodyguards, but his mind is entirely elsewhere. He knows what he has to do, and he knows that once he does it, there's no going back. Because Kang Seong-ho is about to break the most important rule he's ever lived by. He's about to let someone get close enough to destroy him. And if that someone happens to be the woman carrying his child, the woman who has every reason to hate him, then maybe that's exactly what he deserves. Seong-ho's driver knows better than to ask questions when his boss gives an address in Yongsan, instead of the usual route to the penthouse. The black sedan glides through Seoul's late-night streets, past the glittering towers of wealth and into neighborhoods where the lights grow dimmer and the buildings crowd closer together. When they finally stop in front of a deteriorating walk-up, Seong-ho tells his men to wait in the car. The building smells of mildew and old kimchi. Seong-ho descends the narrow stairs to the basement level, his expensive shoes echoing against concrete that's cracked and water-stained. He'd had Ara followed from the restaurant, a simple matter of a phone call and 15 minutes of waiting. Now, standing in front of her door with its peeling paint and broken lock hastily reinforced with a chain, he feels something he hasn't experienced in years. Shame. This is where she's been living. This is where the woman carrying his heir has spent 8 months alone, working shifts at an upscale restaurant to afford a basement apartment that floods when it rains. While he's been sleeping in a penthouse with bulletproof windows and a view of the Han River, she's been here, in the dark, hiding from a world she doesn't understand because of choices he made for her. He knocks, the sound is too loud in the narrow hallway. Silence stretches, then softly her voice comes through the door, "Go away." RSSI, his voice comes out rougher than intended. "We need to talk." "We needed to talk 8 months ago." Her words are steady, but he can hear the tremor underneath. "You made your choice, now leave me alone." Seong-ho presses his palm against the door, imagining he can feel her on the other side. "You're in danger," Park Jin-woo saw. I know what he saw. The door opens so suddenly that Seong-ho nearly stumbles forward. Ara stands there, still in her server's uniform, one hand protectively cradling her swollen belly. Her face is exhausted and furious in equal measure. "I know exactly what your world is, Seong-ho. I've been running from it for 8 months. And now, because I needed a job that paid enough to cover medical bills, I ended up serving dinner to the man who destroyed my life." She looks different from his memories, thinner everywhere except her pregnant belly, with shadows under her eyes that speak of sleepless nights and constant worry. But her gaze is harder now, sharpened by months of survival without him. "How long have you known?" he asks quietly. "Known what? That I was pregnant." Ara's laugh is bitter. "I found out 2 days after you disappeared. I tried calling, your number was disconnected. I went to the bookshop where we used to meet. You'd paid the owner to refuse me entry." She steps back, gesturing to the tiny apartment behind her, a single room with a hot plate, a mattress on the floor and bars on the one small window. "So I did what you told me to do. I stayed away, I hid, and I survived." "I was trying to protect you," Seong-ho says, but the words sound hollow even to him. "You were trying to protect yourself," Ara corrects, "from having to choose between your empire and your humanity. Well, congratulations, you got your wish, but now your rival knows about me and you can't pretend I don't exist anymore." Her hand tightens on her belly, and for the first time, real fear breaks through her anger. "So tell me, Kang Seong-ho, what happens to the pregnant waitress who's inconvenient enough to carry a crime lord's child?" Seong-ho's answer comes in the form of his phone buzzing. He glances at the screen and his jaw tightens. A photo taken less than an hour ago shows Ara's building from across the street. The message below it is from an unknown number, "Interesting neighborhood, easy to access, no security cameras." He holds the phone so Ara can see, watches the color drain from her face as she reads the implication. "Pack a bag," Seong-ho says quietly. "You have 5 minutes." "I'm not going anywhere with you." "Then you'll die here." He steps into the apartment without invitation, already scanning for threats, the window with its flimsy bars, the door with its worthless chain lock, the paper-thin walls that wouldn't stop a bullet. Jin-woo's men are probably already on their way. They'll make it look like a robbery, maybe a tragic accident. By morning, you and my child will be just another statistic in a dangerous neighborhood. Ara's hand moves protectively over her belly, and Seong-ho sees the moment her maternal instinct overrides her pride. She hates him. He can see it in every line of her body. But she loves their unborn child more than she hates him. "If I go with you," she says slowly, "I want your word that I can leave whenever I choose." Seong-ho meets her eyes. "No." The honesty seems to surprise her more than a lie would have. "Once you're in my world, Ara, you can't just walk out. Jin-woo now knows you exist. That knowledge doesn't disappear because you change apartments." He moves closer, keeping his voice low and steady. "But I can keep you alive. I can keep our child safe. And when this is over, when I've eliminated the threat, then you can decide if you want anything to do with me." "When this is over," Ara repeats bitterly. "Men like you never finish their wars, Seong-ho. There's always another enemy, another threat, another reason to keep people locked away for their own good." She's not wrong, but Seong-ho doesn't have the luxury of debating philosophy when assassins might already be climbing her building's stairs. 5 minutes, he repeats, "or I carry you out as you are." Ara stares at him for a long moment, then turns and begins throwing clothes into a worn backpack. Her movements are sharp with fury, but her hands shake. When she reaches for a framed photo on the windowsill, her mother, Seong-ho, realizes, gone for years now. He sees tears sliding down her cheeks that she doesn't bother to wipe away. 20 minutes later, Ara sits in the back of Seong-ho's sedan, watching Seoul's neon lights blur past the tinted windows. She hasn't spoken since they left her apartment, hasn't looked at him, just sits with both hands on her belly, whispering something to their child that Seong-ho can't quite hear. When they pull up to his building, all glass and steel and security, that costs more per month than most people earn in a year, Ara finally breaks her silence. "A gilded cage is still a cage," she says quietly. Seong-ho doesn't argue, because she's absolutely right, and they both know it. The penthouse spans the entire top floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of Seoul that looks like a sea of lights. There's a chef's kitchen Ara will never use, a home theater she'll never watch, a library filled with books she'll never read. Seong-ho shows her to the guest suite, because putting her in his bedroom would be too presumptuous, and somehow that matters to him now. "There's food in the kitchen," he says. "Anything you need, just ask." Ara walks past him into the room and closes the door in his face. The lock clicks with a finality that echoes through the hallway. That's the last word she speaks to him for 3 days. Seong-ho has faced down rival gangs, survived assassination attempts, and negotiated with men who'd gut him for showing weakness, but nothing has prepared him for the absolute silence of a woman who's decided he's not worth her breath. Ara moves through the penthouse like a ghost, existing in the spaces between his presence. When he enters a room, she leaves. When he tries to speak, she looks through him as if he's made of glass. And she doesn't eat. The meals his chef prepares sit untouched on the dining table. Seong-ho watches from his office through the security cameras, sees Ara emerge from her room, stand over the food as if considering it, then walk away. At first he thinks it's defiance, then he realizes it's something worse. She's punishing herself for being weak enough to need his protection, for carrying the child of a man she's learned to hate, for surviving in a world that's tried so hard to crush her. On the 4th morning, Seong-ho finds Ara in the living room, staring out at the city below. She's thinner than when she arrived, her face hollowed out by hunger and stubborn pride. The sight of her standing there, one hand on her pregnant belly, looking like she might disappear entirely, breaks something in him. "You're hurting our child," he says quietly. Ara doesn't turn around. "Our child," she repeats, her voice rough from disuse. "Now you want to claim parenthood. When I was working double shifts to afford prenatal vitamins, where were you? When I was crying myself to sleep in that basement, wondering if I'd done something wrong to make you leave, where were you?" Seong-ho steps closer, keeping distance between them but refusing to look away. "I was securing territory in Busan, eliminating threats before they could reach you. I thought if I stayed away, you'd be safe. You thought if you stayed away, you wouldn't have to feel anything." Ara finally turns, and her eyes are red-rimmed from crying she's done alone in her locked room. "You were terrified that loving me would make you weak, so you decided I was better off abandoned and pregnant than having to see you actually care about something other than power." The accusation lands like a physical blow because it's true. Every word is true, and they both know it. "I was wrong," Seong-ho says, and the admission costs him more than any negotiation he's ever lost. "I was wrong about all of it, but you're here now, and I can't change the past 8 months. What I can do is make sure you and our child survive the next 8 weeks. Ara's laugh is hollow. "Survive, that's your great promise. Not live, not thrive, just survive." She moves toward the door, then pauses. "There's leftover jjiggy in the kitchen. I'll eat if you leave me alone to do it." It's not forgiveness, it's not even a truce, but it's the first crack in the wall between them, and Seong-ho takes it. The attack comes at 3 in the morning on a night when Seoul's winter wind howls against bulletproof glass. Seong-ho is awake in his office, reviewing security reports when the building's power cuts out. Emergency lights flicker on, casting everything in red. His phone is already in his hand, already dialing his head of security, when he hears the sound that stops his heart. Ara screaming. He's moving before conscious thought, gun drawn from the desk drawer, racing down the hallway toward her room. The penthouse has 6 layers of security, armed guards on every floor, surveillance systems that cost more than luxury cars. None of it matters if someone's already inside. Ara's door is open. She's pressed against the far wall, both hands protecting her belly, staring at the figure silhouetted in her doorway. The intruder is dressed in black, face-covered gun equipped with a silencer pointed directly at her chest. Seong-ho doesn't hesitate, doesn't announce himself, doesn't give warnings. He fires twice, center mass, the way he was taught 20 years ago. The intruder drops without a sound. For a moment, the only noise is Ara's ragged breathing and the wind against the windows. Then Seong-ho's security team floods the hallway, voices sharp with urgency, trying to understand how someone breached the impossible. But Seong-ho isn't listening to them. He's crossing the room to Ara, who slid down the wall and is sitting on the floor, shaking so violently her teeth chatter. He kneels in front of her, holstering his weapon, reaching out slowly as if approaching a wounded animal. Are you hurt? His hands hover over her, not quite touching, waiting for permission that doesn't come. Ara shakes her head. She can't seem to speak, just keeps staring at the body in her doorway, at the pool of blood spreading across expensive hardwood, at the reality of the world she's been dragged into. Seong-ho's security chief appears, phone pressed to his ear, face grim. Boss, we have a problem. The intruder bypassed everything. This was an inside job. The words hang in the air like smoke. Someone in Seong-ho's own organization sold them out. Someone he trusted, someone with access to security codes and shift schedules, someone who knew exactly when and how to strike. Find them, Seong-ho says quietly, his eyes never leaving Ara, and when you do, make an example. The security team drags the body away. Someone kills the emergency lights. The penthouse returns to its illusion of safety, but the illusion is shattered now, broken glass that can't be swept away. Ara finally looks at Seong-ho, and her voice comes out hollow. You killed him without hesitating. Yes. You've done this before, many times. Yes. She closes her eyes, fresh tears sliding down her cheeks. The man I thought I loved at that bookshop doesn't exist, does he? He was never real. Seong-ho wants to lie, wants to tell her that person was real, that somewhere underneath the violence and the empire and the blood there's still the man who read poetry and walked her home through quiet streets. But Ara deserves the truth, even when it destroys whatever small progress they've made. No, he says, he wasn't. Ara nods slowly, as if something inside her has finally broken. Then I'm carrying the child of a stranger, a killer, a man who lives in a world where people die on bedroom floors at 3 a.m. She opens her eyes and looks at him with something worse than hatred, something like resignation. You can't protect me from this, Seong-ho, because you are this. 3 days after the attack, Seong-ho arranges for a doctor to visit the penthouse. Not just any doctor. Dr. Kim has been treating members of Seoul's underworld for 30 years, a woman who asks no questions and keeps no records that could surface in court. She arrives with a portable ultrasound machine and the weary professionalism of someone who's seen everything. Ara lies on the leather sofa in what used to be Seong-ho's office, her shirt pulled up to reveal her swollen belly. She hasn't asked Seong-ho to leave, but she hasn't invited him to stay either. He stands near the doorway, uncertain of his place in this moment, this ritual of pending parenthood that should be joyful, but feels like another negotiation in a war neither of them chose. Dr. Kim spreads the cold gel across Ara's skin and presses the transducer against her belly. The room fills with a sound like distant thunder, the rapid flutter of a heartbeat that doesn't belong to either of them. Everything looks healthy, Dr. Kim says, her eyes on the grainy black and white image forming on the screen. The baby's measuring right on track, about 32 weeks. Would you like to know the sex? Ara's hand finds the arm of the sofa, gripping tight. Yes. It's a boy. The words hit Seong-ho like a bullet he didn't see coming. A son, he's going to have a son. The abstract concept of child suddenly becomes concrete, real, a boy who will grow up to be a man who will either follow in his father's bloody footsteps or spend his life running from them. Dr. Kim adjusts the image, and suddenly Seong-ho can see him, really see him. The curve of a tiny spine, the shadow of a hand pressed against Ara's womb as if already trying to push his way into the world. The profile of a face that looks impossibly small and impossibly human all at once. Would you like to come closer? Dr. Kim asks, glancing at Seong-ho. See your son. Seong-ho moves before he realizes he's made the decision, crossing the room until he's standing beside the sofa, looking down at the screen. Ara doesn't acknowledge him, but she doesn't pull away either. Her eyes are fixed on the image of their child, and there's something on her face that Seong-ho hasn't seen since the bookshop days, a kind of fragile hope. He has your nose, Ara whispers. Seong-ho can't tell if that's true from the blurry image, but he doesn't argue. On the screen, their son shifts, stretching in the confined space of Ara's womb. One tiny foot presses outward, visible for just a moment before disappearing again. And Seong-ho understands, with sudden and terrible clarity, that everything has changed. This isn't about guilt anymore, isn't about obligation or protection or making amends for abandonment. This is about the small human being moving on that screen, the son who will be born into a world of violence unless Seong-ho finds a way to give him something different, something better. I want him to be safe, Seong-ho says quietly, not just alive, safe. Ara finally looks at him, and for the first time since the restaurant, there's no anger in her gaze, just exhaustion and a question she's afraid to ask. Safe from what? Seong-ho watches his son move on the ultrasound screen, watches the proof of life he helped create, and gives the only honest answer he has. From me. Park Jin-soo has served as Seong-ho's second-in-command for 7 years. He's the man who handles the dirty work, who negotiates when negotiations turn bloody, who's proven his loyalty through violence and silence in equal measure, which is why he notices when something changes in his boss. It starts small, Seong-ho declining a meeting with arms dealers from Incheon, Seong-ho spending hours in the penthouse instead of making his usual rounds through their territory, Seong-ho asking questions about property in coastal towns, places where nobody knows his name or his face. Jin-soo brings his concerns to the weekly meeting with their inner circle, 5 men who have built empires on Seong-ho's orders and spilled blood at his command. They gather in a private room at a Noribang in Gangnam, where the music covers their conversation and the staff know better than to listen. He's going soft, Jin-soo says, pouring soju into small glasses for each of them. The pregnant woman has gotten into his head. The others exchange glances. Lee Tae-min, who controls their gambling operations, shakes his head. Seong-ho doesn't go soft, he's strategic. Maybe he's planning something we don't see yet. I've seen the surveillance reports from his building, Jin-soo counters. He's had a doctor visit, an obstetrician. He stood there watching an ultrasound like a man playing house, not a man running an empire. He tosses a folder onto the table. Inside are photos, Seong-ho looking at the ultrasound screen, his face unguarded in a way none of them have seen before. That's not strategy, that's weakness. Choi Sung-min, their enforcer, picks up one of the photos and studies it. So what are you suggesting? Jin-soo drinks his soju in one swallow. I'm suggesting that when a king starts caring more about his bastard child than his kingdom, it's time for new leadership. The word hangs in the air like smoke. Coup, mutiny, betrayal. In their world, these things happen with brutal regularity. The strong survive, the weak are eliminated, and sentiment is the fastest path to a shallow grave. You're talking about killing Seong-ho, Tae-min says carefully, the man who built everything we have. I'm talking about preserving what we've built, Jin-soo corrects. Before he tears it down to play father to a waitress and her baby, he leans forward, his voice dropping. Park Jin-woo is already circling. The other families smell blood in the water. If we don't move now, they'll move first, and we'll all go down with Seong-ho's sinking ship. The men around the table are silent, weighing loyalty against survival, honor against ambition. Jin-soo can see the calculation in their eyes, the same calculation that's kept them alive this long. The woman and the child, Tae-min asks finally, what happens to them? Jin-soo's smile is cold. They're the leverage that made Seong-ho weak. Once he's gone, they're just loose ends. He refills the soju glasses, lifting his own in a mock toast, to new leadership, and to eliminating weakness wherever we find it. One by one, the others lift their glasses. Not all of them drink, some still hesitate, still remember the man Seong-ho used to be, but enough of them do. Enough to make Jin-soo's coup not just possible, but inevitable. In the penthouse across the city, Seong-ho sits in the nursery he's been secretly preparing, assembling a crib he ordered online like any normal father-to-be. He doesn't know that his most trusted lieutenant is toasting to his death, doesn't know that the empire he built is about to eat him alive. But he will, soon enough. The warning comes at midnight from the one man Jin-soo failed to turn, Kwon Min-yi, Seong-ho's driver, who's been loyal since the beginning. The text message is 2 words, they're coming. Seong-ho is moving before the phone leaves his hand, checking his weapons, locking down the penthouse's security protocols, preparing for a siege he knew would come eventually, but hoped would wait just a few more weeks. Just long enough for his son to be born, just long enough to get Ara somewhere safe. He finds her in the living room, one hand pressed against her lower back, her face tight with discomfort. She's been having contractions since dinner, but insisted they were just Braxton Hicks, nothing serious, nothing to worry about. We need to move you to the safe room, Seong-ho says, already reaching for her arm. Ara pulls away, and that's when he sees the wetness spreading across her pants, the puddle forming on his expensive marble floor. Her water has broken. No, she whispers, her eyes wide with terror. Not now, not tonight. But Barbies don't wait for convenient timing, and neither do coups. The first explosion tears through the building's lower floors. The penthouse shudders, glass rattling in frames, emergency alarms shrieking. Seong-ho can hear gunfire echoing up through the stairwells, his remaining loyal guards buying them time they don't have. He gets Ara into the master bedroom, the most fortified room in the penthouse, with reinforced walls and a door designed to withstand small arms fire. She's doubled over now, contractions coming hard and fast, her breathing ragged with pain and fear. The hospital, she gasps. We need to get to the hospital. We're not going anywhere. Seong-ho pushes furniture against the door, a dresser, the bed frame, anything heavy enough to slow down what's coming. He can hear footsteps in the hallway now, multiple sets, moving with military precision. Another contraction hits Ara and she cries out, her knees buckling. Seong-ho catches her, lowers her to the floor behind the barricaded door. She grabs his shirt with both hands, her knuckles white. I can't do this, she sobs. Not like this, not here. Yes, you can. Seong-ho takes her hand with his left, his gun in his right, positioning himself between Ara and the door. You're the strongest person I know. You survived 8 months alone. You survived my world. You can survive this. The door shudders under the impact of a battering ram. Once, twice, wood splinters but holds. How long? Seong-ho shouts over the noise. Between contractions, Ara's laugh is half scream. 2 minutes, maybe less. Another impact, the dresser slides backward 6 inches. Seong-ho fires 3 shots through the door, hears a body drop on the other side, hears cursing in voices he recognizes. His own men, the people he trusted, now trying to kill the mother of his child. Ara's scream tears through the room as another contraction hits. Her hand crushes his, nails digging into his skin hard enough to draw blood. He doesn't let go. Breathes, he tells her, the same word over and over, keeping his gun trained on the weakening door. Just breathe. The longest night of Seong-ho's life stretches ahead of them, measured in contractions and gunshots, in the sound of his empire trying to murder its way into the room where his son is being born. For 3 hours, Seong-ho holds that door. He fires until his ammunition runs low, reloads with one hand while holding Ara with the other, listens to her screams mix with the sound of dying men in the hallway. Jinsu's voice comes through the shattered door, offering mercy if Seong-ho surrenders the woman and walks away. Seong-ho's answer is another bullet. But eventually, inevitably, Ara's final scream is different. Higher, desperate, and then another sound fills the room, the thin, furious wail of a newborn cutting through smoke and chaos like a declaration of war against the world that tried to prevent his existence. Seong-ho risks a glance back. Ara is collapsed against the wall, covered in blood and sweat, holding a tiny, squirming bundle against her chest. Their son, alive, real, worth everything. We have to move, Seong-ho says, his voice rough. Now. He triggers the emergency protocol he built into the penthouse years ago, when paranoia was just good business sense. The explosives hidden in the walls, the incendiary devices planted throughout the building, all set to detonate in sequence. Enough to collapse the entire structure. Enough to ensure no bodies could be identified in the rubble. The secret passage opens behind the bookshelf, because of course a man like Seong-ho would have an escape route. He gathers Ara into his arms, careful of the newborn between them, and carries them both into the darkness. Behind them, the bedroom door finally splinters apart. Jinsu and his men flood into the room, guns raised, expecting to find their former boss making his last stand. Instead, they find an empty room, and the steady beeping of countdown timers hidden in every wall. Jinsu's realization comes too late. The explosion is massive enough to shake the entire district. The penthouse erupts in flames that can be seen from across the Han River, a pillar of fire reaching toward the winter sky. News helicopters arrive within minutes, filming the inferno, reporting the death of Seoul's most feared crime lord in what appears to be a violent coup gone wrong. In the wreckage, they'll eventually find bodies, enough of them to account for Jinsu and his conspirators. Enough charred remains to declare Kang Seong-ho dead, though dental records will be inconclusive and DNA testing impossible. The criminal underworld will accept it because they want to believe it. Power abhors a vacuum, and Seong-ho's empire is worth fighting over. Park Jin-woo will move first, claiming territory while the ashes are still warm. Others will follow. Within weeks, Seoul's criminal landscape will tear itself apart in a war of succession, everyone fighting over the corpse of an empire that no longer has a king. But Kang Seong-ho isn't dead. He's in a car driving south, away from Seoul, away from everything he built with blood and violence over 2 decades. Ara sits beside him in the back seat, their son wrapped in a blanket she grabbed during their escape. The baby has stopped crying now, content against his mother's chest, unaware that his first hours of life have been spent fleeing through the dark. Where are we going? Ara asks quietly. Seong-ho watches Seoul disappear in the rearview mirror, watches the orange glow of his burning empire fade into the night. Somewhere they'll never look, somewhere no one knows my face. He reaches over, carefully touching his son's tiny hand, somewhere safe. For the first time since the restaurant, Ara doesn't pull away from his touch. The coastal town of Yosu smells like salt water and baking bread. It's a place where fishermen still mend their nets by hand and tourists come for the scenery, not the nightlife. A place where nobody asks too many questions about the quiet couple who opened a small bakery on a side street 6 months ago. The man they know as Kim Min-ho has flour in his hair and on his worn jeans. He's up at 4 every morning, kneading dough while the town still sleeps, baking the sweet red bean pastries and crusty loaves that have made their little shop unexpectedly popular. His hands, once accustomed to guns and violence, now shape sourdough with surprising gentleness. It's early afternoon when Ara comes down from their apartment above the bakery, their son balanced on her hip. At 13 months old, little Jihoon has his father's serious eyes and his mother's smile. He reaches for Seong-ho immediately, chubby arms extended, babbling in the language only toddlers understand. Seong-ho wipes his hands on his apron, an apron, something the old version of himself would have found laughable, and takes his son. Jihoon immediately grabs a handful of flour-dusted hair and laughs when white powder falls like snow. He's going to need a bath, Ara says, but there's no reproach in her voice, just quiet amusement. We both will, Seong-ho bounces Jihoon gently, watching his son's delighted reaction. This small human who doesn't know his father was once Seoul's most feared crime lord, who will grow up thinking his father has always been a baker in a sleepy coastal town, who will never have to choose between love and survival the way Seong-ho did. A customer enters, and Ara moves to help them while Seong-ho keeps Jihoon entertained behind the counter. This is their routine now, mornings in the kitchen, afternoons managing the shop together, evenings walking along the beach with their son between them. It's ordinary, peaceful, everything Seong-ho's old life wasn't. Later, after closing, they sit at one of the small tables while Jihoon naps in his playpen. Ara is reviewing their accounts. They're making enough to live on barely, but it's honest money earned through early mornings and hard work. Seong-ho watches her in the golden afternoon light, this woman who refused to forgive him for months, who looked at him with justified hatred after he killed a man in her doorway. What? Ara asks, feeling his gaze. Nothing, just thinking. About Seoul. The question catches him off guard. They never talk about Seoul. Never mention the news reports that occasionally filter down about gang wars in Gangnam, about the power vacuum left by Kang Seong-ho's death, about the violence that's claimed dozens of lives in the past year. No, Seong-ho says honestly. I was thinking about how Jihoon said something that sounded like Appa this morning, and how you smiled when I told you. Ara's expression softens in a way it hasn't before. He's been saying it all week. I didn't want to tell you because I knew you'd get emotional about it. I'm not emotional, Seong-ho protests, but his voice cracks slightly. Ara laughs, actually laughs, and the sound is so unexpected that Seong-ho can't help but smile. She reaches across the table and takes his flour-covered hand in hers. It's the first time she's initiated contact since Jihoon was born, the first time she's touched him without flinching. You're covered in flour, she says quietly. Instead of blood, you smell like bread instead of gunpowder. Her thumb traces over his knuckles, over scars that have softened with time and honest work. I'm starting to believe that Kim Min-ho is real, that maybe the man I loved at the bookshop still exists somewhere underneath everything else. Seong-ho turns his hand to hold hers properly. He does, because of you, because of him. He glances at their sleeping son. You gave me a reason to become someone worth becoming. Ara looks at him for a long moment, and then she smiles. Really smiles, the way she used to when they were just two people walking through quiet streets without ghosts following them. It's not forgiveness, not quite, but it's close. And for the first time in his life, Kang Seong-ho, Kim Min-ho now, understands what peace feels like.